Hey world, I'm back talking about Mark Manson's book, Everything is Effed, and we're doing chapter 1 today. Before we jump into that, I wanted to give you a little glimpse of my t-shirt. Oh yeah, Hope City. I mentioned last time that I have a hope wall and just really cool things on my wall that I'm excited about. So this week, before we start chapter 1, is I'm going to show you what we have here is, yep, that's the board game that myself and a few others created. Basically, the idea of Detroit and can it make a comeback. So that was like a 5-year hope project. Very exciting. Taught me a lot about hope. And now, as we dive into the first chapter of this book again, it's a book about hope. Book about hope. We have to look at kind of the elephant in the room, and that is Mark's assumption. His biggest assumption is that everything is effed. We all have assumptions. We come into the room with them, you know. This one is interesting because not only is it in your face is the biggest assumption of the whole book, but the way it starts off, chapter 1, is he's telling this really interesting story about World War II and this guy who sacrifices and suffers to save others, and hero story. And he concludes, yeah, that's when things were, way back then, that's when things were really messed up. And now, things are better than ever. And you're kind of like, I'm confused, Mark. How I thought everything was effed up. His conclusion is interesting and kind of got this Freakonomics, Malcolm Gladwell, counterintuitive piece to it that I like. And he's basically saying, yeah, now in this time, we're probably more prosperous and healthier than we've ever been. So since we have more than we've ever had, we now have more to lose. Let that sink in for a second. So now we have, and I don't know if you agree with this, but for the most part, we could say now, compared to 50 years ago, even, or 100 years ago, we have more than we've ever had. My instance is I'm an asthmatic and I need an inhaler. So I can take one puff and I'm all better, as opposed to my grandmother who had to suck wind for 3 hours just to get over it. So, you know, I'm very thankful for the times that we live in. So he's saying that we're more prosperous than we've ever been, healthier than we've ever been, but at the same time, there's more anxiety, more depression, more addiction than there's been in 50 to 100 years. So how do you account for that? And the way you account for it is that we have more to lose. And if you fear losing something, that creates anxiety. So I don't know if I agree with him, but I think that he's got a big piece of the puzzle there. I think he points out that in most prosperous countries, that's where the suicide rate is the highest. So there's something going on that's kind of counterintuitive there, and what is it? The second question is, does hope have any part in solving that problem? Is hope real, and is it just a gimmick, or is it actually going to help us overcome some of these problems? He defines hope as kind of a narrative, and you take this character from a place of being lost and a place of despair and moving that character to a place of future salvation. Now, he's not a Christian, he's an atheist, but he's saying, there's some kind of deliverance or something better in the future. And for him, he says, we all have something that we need in life to give us purpose. And for him, I'm going to read it for you here. It's, and the narrative that I've constructed around that hope is that I believe this book might help some people, that it might make both my life and the world a little bit better. Now, that's a small phrase that everyone would probably agree with right off the bat, right? But here's another assumption, that hope is about making life better. This is not a new idea. This is the word amelioration is kind of the philosophy here. And you can even go back. I pulled off another hope book off my shelf. This guy, John Dewey. It's like a whole book about how he created the Dewey Decimal System. No, that would be way boring. So he did do that, but he also had some great ideas on hope, which I found very interesting. But John Dewey, same thing about making the world a better place. Now that's dangerous because it's better is a comparative word. So is my life better now than it was before? Yes, in some ways not. If I want a better life in the future, am I going to be disappointed if some of it's better and some of it's not? Like, crushed hope is very powerful, so we have to be careful about what we hope for. So is better the best word to use? And like, even if you think about it, when we say let's make America great again, you're basically saying let's make it better than it was. But in saying that, better for some means maybe worse for others. So if, like, you think about the people across the border, put a wall up, it's worse for them, but better for us perhaps. So hope becomes this politically charged word of, if when we say let's make it better, people are going to think right away, oh, okay, yeah, it's going to be better for you, but it's not going to be better for me. And then hope becomes this word that's not trusted. So I think there's a better definition of hope than that. And I didn't come up with it, but a guy about a couple thousand years ago, Jesus, pretty smart guy, said, I have come that you might have life, not a better life, but that you might have life to the full. That you might have fruitful lives. And that's genius, because for the person who's dying from cancer, their days are not getting better. They can't hope for better. They're just hoping that it's not as painful tomorrow as it was today. So things are getting worse. And as we get closer to death, things, our bodies shut down. So how do we hope in the midst of things getting worse? And this idea of being full and fruitful, I think, is powerful. We can hope for forgiveness, for reconciliation, for just cherishing each moment that we have left. There's a lot of things that we can hope for, even as things get worse. Things actually become more meaningful if we suffer in the right way. So that's just something to think through, is your assumptions about hope, your assumptions on life, because they're going to affect what you hope for, what I hope for, and it's going to put us into like this trap of, like, if I say I'm hoping for this, it might be like, oh, okay, well, that's going to disappoint someone. Whereas if we say let's hope for a full life, I think everyone can be enriched. John Dewey had, actually Mark Manson had 3 components of hope that we should consider. And he dives these are basically the 3 things that he's going to dive into in the rest of the book. But to him, if we break hope up into 3 parts, you're going to need to have control. So if I don't have any power or any say or anything, to do with it, I'm going to lose hope. I need some sort of control. The second thing I need in a situation is to see value in something. So, for instance, if I don't value something, I don't want it. If I don't want it, then I don't hope for it. Case closed. And the third thing is community. So community is interesting. It might kind of be surprising to you, but community is kind of like, this is where we get perspective on values. So like if I connect with a community that likes to run, to race, I might learn, what's so important about competition, what's so important about being in shape, and those kind of things. So he's going to unpack those for us. I like Dewey's 3 things that he says, and I'll open that up. He says, really, 3 components of hope are gratitude, and intelligent wholeheartedness, and enriched present experience. Now, that enriched present experience he draws out to say, basically, we need to look at hope by connecting the past, the present, and the future. And that kind of is more satisfying. I like that perspective a lot, because I'm not just looking for a better future. I'm looking to see how the past and the present and the future are all connected. And that really gives us a better narrative anyway. So those are some thoughts of chapter 1. Mark, you have some creative ideas here, and looking forward to seeing how you unpack them.